With the rumors around another attempt at a TV adaptation for the Dresden Files, we are now on to season 4 of my vision for how they could adapt these books to a compelling TV series. The only rules that I have are that I have to stick to the model that they have actually rumored to be using, and I get 10 episodes per season. And this one is all about the Black Council.
The Belated Binge Podcast.
Hi, and welcome to Belated Binge. My name's Zach, former radio host, lifelong sports fan, discovering the magic of urban fantasy. Spoiler warning today for all things Dresden Files through Battleground. Please subscribe if you are watching this on YouTube. Follow if you're listening on your favorite podcast player. And I want to kind of reiterate what we're doing here. There have been rumors about Jim Butcher, the author of the Dresden Files, being in deep conversations about a new adaptation of the Dresden Files for TV. We know that they made an attempt once upon a time that for right now we're going to pretend doesn't exist. That's a conversation for another day. But what the rumors are currently is that they are planning to do a adaptation of the Dresden Files based off of a 3-book arc of the war against the Red Court and Harry and Susan Rodriguez's relationship and how all of that plays out. So I gave myself the challenge of how do you take that foundation and build it into a full series that successfully adapts the full Dresden Files story for TV. We are now on season 4 of that vision. You can watch the first 3 that I posted previously. And as I've said in some of those previous episodes, this book series, I believe, is so successful because of the characters and their development and their relationships to Harry throughout. Yes, the supernatural stuff is awesome. And yes, Jim Butcher does bring things in to this giant, really amazing world that he has built in a very unique way and doing clever stuff and sometimes getting away with things that are just so silly, and yet they feel authentic for the world that Harry Dresden lives in. All of that is great. All of that lends itself to a really, really strong book series. But I think the thing that grips everybody and kind of keeps them invested throughout it is the character journey that you're on. And so keeping that at the theme of all of these seasons, for season 4, my vision of this, I think this is when you bring back or bring in, I guess, and build upon the relationship of Harry to the council, specifically through the Black Council storyline. And so you get his relationship with Ramirez, you get his relationship to McCoy, you get his relationship to Morgan and Lucio, and that stuff all gets to be kind of fleshed out in this season. That's really all focused around that storyline of the Black Council and kind of like Harry's relationship with the council, his falling out with the council, kind of the potential fall of the council. And I think that could really make itself a cool, I guess, framework to work from for a season of television. And so this is where we move away, I guess, from primarily having like 3 books to focus on for each season. That's kind of what it's been for the past few. It's been largely 3-book plot lines, and you just kind of you take sections of it and to make your, episodic series for TV, and you get 10 of them and ta-da. We don't have that here because Harry's relationship with the council spans across just about every single book in this series in some form or fashion. And so this is where we start to kind of pull in almost smaller threads from a lot of the books and tie them all together into one cohesive narrative. And so I think that could be really interesting. And we can go all the way back to the beginning for this in Stormfront. We can take quite a bit from Deadbeat. That's going to be a big one here. We're going to have some Turncoat And then we're going to have some changes, and we're going to have peace talks and battleground in this. So those are going to be our, what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 books that we're really pulling the story from and kind of putting it together in a way that makes it feel natural with the previous seasons that we've done for TV. We've talked about in some of those episodes that it takes a little bit of creativity around the timeline, and around kind of like making small adjustments to the plot lines in the book so that you can make them stand alone in their own like TV adaptation world without losing what makes them awesome, but also without making them too confusing by introducing too many elements. Because if there's one thing that these 17 books that we have of Dresden, it's that we have a lot of storylines that are being juggled at any given time. And so I think with the Black Council story, or the Harry and the Council story, Fall of a Council story, whatever, however you want to frame this into a catchy hook for a season title, if you will, we go back to the beginning in Stormfront, particularly the stuff between Harry and Morgan. Have Harry go ahead and solve the case of the like Three Eye, and have him kill the what do they call him in that book? A lot of times Victor sells the Shadow Man, and have the backstory in there to where we can understand that Harry's doing all of this still under the doom of Damocles, and then have the doom of Damocles lifted at the end of that first episode, and yet show evidence of like corruption within the council. I think that would be a really gripping first episode for this portion of the story. I think you can still make it work chronologically with the previous seasons without making it feel like there's a big time jump here and we're going backwards in the story. I think you can build upon it, and you may even pull in some of Harry's past of being having relationships with the White Count, or with the White Court of Vampires. You can pull in some of the Red Court stuff, um, and some of his suspicions, I guess you could say, around even the Denarian story, and you can tie them in here to kind of all accumulating as to like why he's so negatively viewed from the council. And so it doesn't have to just be the Justin Demorne stuff, but you can obviously include it because it belongs there. So I think you can build upon that pretty well to have that really work towards this constant unease, and this constant friction between Harry and the White Council that he's a part of. But you haven't done so from the context of his direct involvement within the council. And so you get to show a lot of that when you jump into the storylines from Deadbeat. So you actually get 3 episodes, I think, out of Deadbeat. Your first one is going to be Harry on like a new case that ties to the Kemmler disciples and the necromancy that we have in the book series. And I think that you end that first episode with Harry saving Butters, who the one adjustment here is that if you've done the Denarian story in season 2, as we have put forth in this version of the adaptation, in this kind of alternate Dresden universe, if you will, the difference here is that Butters isn't just a useless medical examiner, as he is kind of introduced to the Deadbeat story. Granted, we knew Butters before Deadbeat, but really Deadbeat is like the Butters book, right? The Butters introduction book, and it's kind of all. I mean, in that book, Thomas mentions kind of harshly that the dude's a coward, and you really, they fleshed out kind of a lot of what makes Butters a coward in that book. And that's something that I think it's unfortunate in the way that we're talking through the TV adaptation in this way is I think you lose some of that for when Butters becomes a Knight of the Cross. Like he does have a or Knight of the Sword, however you want to look at that, Knight of the Lightsaber. Um, but he it part of what makes that so kind of crazy and fascinating of a character arc is that he started off in this book as being introduced as such a coward, right? And so you did lose that a little bit in this alternate sequence of events, but that's what happens when we have to focus on like one main chunk of the story per season and we bounce around the timeline. So I'll probably do some kind of like a recap episode after I go through all of these different seasons and kind of give my thoughts on whether it would work or not, or if there are other ways that it might be potentially more successful to put it together. But again, as I mentioned earlier, in this we're following the rules that they have put forth by saying that they are focusing on a Red Court of Vampire story. So that's the foundation of which we are building. We I gave that stipulation to this whole exercise. So instead of Butters being the coward in this iteration of this story being told, he is a Knight of the Sword, and let's say he's kind of dealing with a giant kind of attack at the medical examiner's office because he is still a medical examiner as well. And, he's attacked by necromancers like he is in the book. He's just not, terrified. He's just, one person taking on several. And so maybe that's where like Harry comes in and helps and gets him, they get out together, and that's your like second episode of the season. Your third episode is going to come from the zombie attack on Harry's home, and our little trio making it from there to Murphy's house. So it's Harry and Thomas and Butters, just like it is in the books, getting past the zombies that are trying to bust down Harry's wards in his door. And um, again, your only alteration is that Butters isn't useless. So you do have to reframe him getting taken and being kind of the leverage that is used against Harry, and Harry kind of making the trade for Butters' life, if you will. Um, but I think you can have a big altercation with a bunch of zombies and have it be that Butters is still put in a compromised position and Harry makes a similar trade on his behalf. Like I don't think that's difficult to do for TV, and I don't think that it betrays the source material by too much because let's face it, you got three people and a whole horde of zombies. You, it's not real. It's not a detriment to Butters' character if he doesn't come out and just slay all of the beasts all of the time. I think that's okay. And I think it could be exciting to see on TV. So that's your third episode of the season. And then you wrap up the Deadbeat portion of the story from there, basically with the dinosaur necromancy and the battle that ends with Harry and Ramirez taking the dinosaur into the sphere of necromancy and all that stuff. Because the thing that I've failed to mention is that in episode 3, along with the zombie attack, once they've gotten to Murphy's, you still have Harry call in the council, and you still have him have that conversation and be made warden of the council, and all of that plays out just like it does in the book. The only, again, slight alteration is that we have been introduced to Ramirez in this alternate timeline for this adaptation. So it's just not the first time that Harry has met Ramirez. I think that's okay. I think you can still have the whole thing pretty much take place the same way that it did, and then play out in that following episode where you've got them riding the dinosaur and fighting together, and you can have the the internal conflict with Morgan and Harry, and the body swap for Lucio, and you can have all that stuff. And I think that that makes that actually makes a really strong episode for TV. And then I think that because this is the council story and the Black Council story, you don't end the episode with the defeating of Kemmler's disciples. I think you end it with Harry and Ramirez in the hospital afterwards and having them have a conversation about um, about their suspicions. And if you recall, this is actually what happens after Harry and Ramirez do the duel down in the deeps in the White Court portion of the story. So we've just taken this hospital portion and we've moved it into this season so that we can hone in on like the suspicions of the council and have those two kind of lay that foundational groundwork where it felt like they were going to truly be allies in this quest to out the traitor and take down the dirty members of the council, the Black Council. Harry even, they even talk about what they both named this concept, and I think that fits in really well here. And I think that's why you just kind of make that tiny little shift. It still honors the book series. It just happens in a slightly different order, and I think that's a really strong like end of an episode to be like, oh, we just got through this major physical conflict, but now we've got this internal conflict that's really coming to the forefront of the story in a way that people, are truly seeing and know about it. And that leads us into a portion of Turncoat from there where Morgan needs Harry's help. And I think you can have this basically use a vast majority of the storyline that's in that book, right? You have to do I think the only thing that you don't have in there that is strong in the book is the Molly stuff, because we've not introduced Molly as Harry's apprentice yet. We've not introduced the Fae yet. And so I think you might have watched some of these videos or listened to them as podcasts and thought like, what about Molly sometimes in these story arcs? And I promise I did not forget Molly exists. I just have kind of I kind of have a plan for her and when to really flesh her out. And unfortunately, since we haven't been able to set her up properly, all we've done is show a little bit of her being a kid. I think I don't think this is the place. So basically, you take out the Molly portion of Turncoat, but you still have the Harry and Morgan like feud happening while Harry is helping Morgan. And you really hone in more on the portion of that book where it's Harry trying to investigate the council itself, who is investigating Morgan. And you focus in on that reveal of like, there's a traitor within the council. It's not just Harry, being suspicious anymore. We literally see that something is going down from the inside. And we get that reveal where it's what's his name? Crap. I should have looked it up before I started talking, but I thought I just knew it. It'll come to me. Peabody. There it is. Told you it'd come to me. So you get the Peabody reveal, and then maybe you kind of tie a little bit of a bow around that like piece of it with like maybe the warden makes some kind of comment about like, well, now it's done and it's over, and it's like we know that it goes beyond this, right? But you have maybe some faction within that's trying to use Peabody as like the full on scapegoat at that point in time to cover up the fact that there's still some hinkiness going on within the council. And that I think is a really I think that's a really strong first half of a season for TV when we consider the Black Council portion of the story from the Dresden Files. And so before we jump into the second half, I want to remind you that I do have a Patreon, patreon.com/belated binge. There's bonus stuff dating back over the past 4 years that's there. There is also um, early access to these episodes that I drop pretty much when I make them as opposed to when I'm releasing them. So, in some cases, you can get them quite early and quite far in advance, particularly on the days where I've been able to get ahead a little bit in this content creation game. If you're a member of the Patreon, you are able to pretty much get a hold of those when they're made, as opposed to when they are released for general consumption. So, and there's a couple other perks in there if you're interested in shout outs and episodes and things like that. Check out the patreon.com/belated binge for all of that stuff. Now, for the second half of this is where we talk about where we start to get into some of the events that basically lead to Harry's fallout from the council, and it starts with changes, and we have this forming of the Gray Council, which is really interesting. I think you can do some really fun character stuff between Harry and McCoy. They're kind of, you know, they're kind of moles within their own organization. You can have them come out to aid Harry in a battle. I think the alteration that you need to make here is that because we've already had the fight with the Red Court vampires end in season 1 of this TV show, I think you just make this a battle against Cal, um, and do it up that way, and use this as essentially fodder for the council to become even more suspicious of Harry. For whatever reason, due to the corruption from the inside, you have Cowell like playing puppet master almost, and you have this big blow up of some kind, and there's maybe you give it implications for the council, like maybe it causes them problems because they were, I don't know, exposed, or they were forced to do something they didn't want to do, and they blame Harry for it. They blame Harry for orchestrating the whole problem, as opposed to Cowell, who maybe at this point maybe they're claiming he doesn't exist, even though we have set up Cowell in previous seasons to be a villain. He just hasn't been in the forefront, and so this is the season where he's even more front and center of all the havoc that's being wreaked to the council, and he clearly has involvement with it. And so that's how you I think that's how you incorporate the Gray Council stuff from changes that I think is very imperative to have here, while not screwing up your adaptation that you've done with the Red Corps being forever ago at this point in TV land, and still make something really cool and compelling for TV. And that's when we start to jump into the peace talks and battlegrounds section. And so we've actually got 4 episodes left, and we really get to spend some time here in that giant peace talks battleground ecosystem that all was intended to be one book anyways. But we get it, I think, with the first episode of this portion, which is going to be the 7th episode of the season. This is where we've got the council investigating Harry as a fallout of that battle that I talked about with Cal, his relationship with Lara and Thomas and the White Court of Vampires. We're still blaming Harry for the war with the Red Court and all of that. We still can, that way, we can still have Ramirez and McCoy like warn him about the pending vote on his status as a wizard and member of the White Council and warden of the White Council. Um, to the only piece of this that we're not going to be including in here that would follow directly from the books is the part about him being the Winter Knight and influencing that vote. Um, because we, again, I'll say it for the thousandth time at this point, haven't really introduced the Fae. So we don't have that Winter Knight portion teed up for it. But let's be honest, we don't really need it for this part because the White Council has hated Harry long before the Winter Night stuff, and he's had plenty of run-ins with the council so far. The Winter Night thing is just kind of another thing to add to the list, and so I think we'll be okay to to have plenty of reason for them to be mad at Harry with what we've set up, even without the Winter Night piece. And so then you get into the next episode, which is all around the dinner. And I think this is basically happening as normal in the books, with the exception of the rescuing Thomas side plot. Um, that's already happened in the previous season around the White Court. We just adjusted that to be happening at a different dinner. And you'll notice a theme here. That's something that I've done in multiple of these outlines for these contained story arcs. Is the biggest challenge to it, aside from time jumping around the book series, is this peace talks and battleground portion where everything is coming to a head and everybody is in the same place. And unfortunately, because with the TV adaptations, you're not able to give all of the details that are in the books. You can't include everyone, and so a lot of what is ultimately happening here is that single dinner that's being hosted by Marcone for the peace talks in the book is just kind of being altered to be a different dinner function for a different reason in each of the different like season self-contained story arcs. But so for this one, it's a dinner for peace talks with the Fomor, which you can have in there, and honestly, you can maybe tie them into Cowl somehow, because we're not going to be focusing on the Titan in this version. I think tying the Fomor to Cowl actually makes it for a cool wrinkle. To keep the conflict there and players that are relevant to the Black Council storyline and the Council storyline with Harry, but just kind of alter their what you call it, motivations a little bit, I guess, allegiances a little bit, and they can still pretty much do the same thing they've been doing. So then you have the Fomor come in and blow up the peace talks dinner and negotiation the same way that they did, just without a Titan behind them, to make Mab look bad, because Mab's not going to be there anyway. So I think all of that works for TV, and I think it stays rooted in the based on the books angle that we're going for here, so that you've now set up your final episodes, which I think this is going to be one of those situations where it's like a season finale, part 1, part 2, for episodes 9 and 10, and that's where you get you pull from Battleground. So you have part 1, battle with the Fomor, and you kind of take it through pretty much the beats of the battle that's taking place in the Battleground book, and you essentially take it up to when Harry and the other like younger wardens get confronted by the Black Court vampires and Dracul, and that's your ending of part 1 of this like giant battle. Like, what the heck? Why, how are they involved here, kind of thing? And you start to see this for a bigger conspiracy than just the Fomor, or than just Cowl, or than just the Black Council. Is like, oh, now we've got Blackheart vampires to, this group of vampires to worry about too. Um, I think that's I think that still fits in and is still pretty cool. And that can be your confrontation and your ending of part one of this battle episode. And you've got pretty much Harry and Ramirez are the last two standing in that giant altercation, and Ramirez is in rough shape, and that's kind of like oh crap, now what are we going to do? And then your final episode, finale of this season is the rest of how that battle plays out with the Fomor. Again, without the Titan part, but you basically have Harry and the Wardens and the Council that are left defeating the Fomor, running them off. You see, maybe Cal gets away in some form or fashion, just kind of, squeeze him in there somewhere. And it ends in the aftermath where Ramirez goes and informs Harry that he's had his status as a wizard revoked. He's no longer warden. He's no longer a member of the White Council. He no longer has any of their affiliations or protections. And now he's kind of essentially an outlaw, and they're going to be, keeping a close eye on him, expecting him to be an enemy, more or less. And they've, in the way that you can tie kind of a whole bow around this, I think, is that basically all of the havoc that Cowl has just put the council through, Harry being the scapegoat and taking the blame for all of it. And it's justified because of his relationships that he has outside of the council with like the White Court of Vampires, his role in the Red Court, and all of that gets snowballed into this like Harry's the bad guy story for the council. And I think we keep kind of getting hints that Cowl is on the inside, and he's the one that's manipulating all of the pieces, including getting Harry to be that scapegoat. And I think that's a really cool season of TV for this portion of the Dresden Files adaptation. And so that would be my vision for season 4 in this scenario. If you are watching on YouTube, let me know in the comments what would be your favorite part of like the Black Council story and Harry's relationship with the council to be adapted for TV from any part of the books, whether it follows the way that I outlined it for this exercise, or just like anything from the books between Harry and the council that you think would make for the best TV. Let me know that down in the comments. Of course, while you're there, subscribe to the channel as well. Hit the like, all of those things. If you're listening on your favorite podcast player, go ahead and review the podcast 5 stars, please. And remember, life is short. Drive your trusty old Beetle. Curl up in your basement apartment with a good book. Fuego, the whole damn building. If anybody has a problem with it, just make sure that Bob gets out safely and you are able to work with your local Svart elves to keep just enough actual electricity working so that you can catch the next episode of Belated Binge.